It was a standard Monday morning at St. Helena Medical Center, characterized by its usual clamor and frantic pace. Telephones chimed relentlessly. Announcements for medical emergencies blared from intercoms, and nurses clad in blue uniforms maneuvered gurneys over gleaming floors as physicians called out orders in packed hallways. The atmosphere was a maelstrom of both urgency and familiarity. For the staff, it was simply the beginning of another demanding week. Suddenly, the routine was shattered. With a soft whoosh, the automatic glass doors to the ER entrance glided open, an event that went unnoticed for a brief second. Then, a sharp intake of breath was heard. A tall, slender German shepherd had entered the building. Mud soiled his fur, which was also stained with a substance that was darker, blood. The dog, later identified as Max, wore no collar and had no apparent owner. Yet, the deliberateness of his gait indicated he was more than a mere stray. The most startling detail, however, was yet to come. Secured to his back with what appeared to be strips of torn cloth and rope was a young girl, listless and unresponsive. Her limbs hung limply by his flanks, her face was ashen, and her hair was clumped with grime and caked blood. A wave of astonished silence washed over the ER lobby. The pen of a receptionist paused in its path. A physician stopped speaking abruptly, his gaze fixed on the unbelievable sight. The steady click of the dog's claws echoed on the tiled floor as he advanced toward the reception area. His look was concentrated and sharp, not of alarm, but of earnest and resolute appeal. For a few drawn-out moments, movement ceased. The atmosphere felt surreal, as if the hospital had been plunged into a dreamlike or nightmarish state. Questions lingered in the air. How did he enter? From where did he originate? Could this be some kind of macabre prank? Then, a chilling understanding moved through the room. The dog was not wandering aimlessly. He was bringing her for help. Whatever transpired outside was clearly a matter of extreme urgency. Nobody present could fully process the scene before them. The canine, stained with mud, bleeding, and quiet, held his ground in the center of the emergency room. The small girl remained fastened securely on his back. His chest heaved with strained breathing, yet he did not waver or fall. He simply waited. It was Nurse Lena Morris who reacted first. At only 28, she had managed numerous pediatric trauma situations, but none resembling this. Her focus locked onto the child, then shifted to the dog's unwavering gaze. She moved forward with slow caution. As Lena neared, Max dipped his head slightly, emitting a deep, throaty rumble. It was not a threat, but a caution, a plea. His muscles grew taut, not from aggression, but from anxiety. He was still protecting her. Lena paused momentarily. Her gut reaction urged her to halt, but her professional training and a more profound feeling prompted her to trust. She knelt, her voice serene and low. "It's all right," she murmured. "I am here to assist. I give you my word." The dog's ears twitched, and his tail gave a slight flick. He observed her with intelligent, tired eyes, and then, very gradually, he shifted back just a small amount. That was all the encouragement Lena required. She reached out with gentle, steady arms and lifted the girl from his back. The child was alarmingly light. Her skin felt cool and damp. Her breathing was shallow. Lena held her firmly against her chest and pivoted towards the trauma bay. "We have a pediatric emergency," she yelled. "Get room 3 ready now." The room erupted into action immediately. Gurneys were wheeled out, emergency supplies were opened, and the code blue alarm was activated. Doctors and nurses surged forward like a single entity. Yet, amid it all, behind the turmoil and flashing lights, Max remained by himself. He made no attempt to flee. He attempted to follow. Inside Trauma Room 3, the atmosphere crackled with intensity. Dr. Patel, the hospital's head ER physician, rushed in as Lena carefully positioned the girl on the gurney. Monitors sprang to life. The hiss of oxygen lines filled the air. Gloved hands worked with robotic precision, attaching electrodes to the child's small chest and inserting IVs into delicate veins. "Heart rate is erratic," someone announced. "BP is falling," another voice added. "She's hypothermic," Dr. Patel stated with a frown. "Oxygen at 15 liters. Let's get her warm immediately." But in the midst of the swift activity, a dreadful quiet permeated the space. A quiet that posed a single question. Who is she? There was no identification, no school bag, no hints to her identity. For the moment, She was entered into the records as Jane Doe, a nameless child near death, brought in by a dog with no known owner. Just beyond the doors of the trauma bay, Max paced with agitation. His claws made a restless tapping sound on the tile. Each time a person went into or out of the room, he would try to go with them, only to be gently intercepted by hospital security. But he did not bark or resist. He waited. After some time, one of the younger nurses, touched by his quiet distress, approached security and said softly, "Let him pass. He won't go anywhere without her." There was a short pause. Then, the doors swung open. Max entered without hesitating, his head low and his tail still. He walked to the gurney and sat beside it, his gaze locked on the wires, the screens, and the girl. The medical staff continued their work around him, taken aback but respectful. Whatever the history behind this unusual duo, one fact was now undeniable. He belonged with her, and he was not going to leave. Outside the trauma bay, a small crowd had formed. Nurses, technicians, and even a couple of security guards stood watching through the glass with a sense of quiet wonder. None had witnessed anything like it. Inside, Max stayed planted next to the gurney, his amber eyes fixed on the girl. He didn't react to the beeping equipment, the brilliant overhead lamps, or the hurried activity of the doctors. He just remained motionless and vigilant, as if he comprehended everything that was happening. Nurse Lena Morris stepped out for a moment and went to the security desk. She held the dog's frayed leather collar, examining it once more for any identifying marks, but found none. There was no tag, no inscription. It was just a piece of cracked, time-worn leather. "Did you scan him for a microchip?" she inquired. A technician confirmed with a nod. "We did. No chip, no registration." Lena frowned. "He didn't arrive here by chance. He brought her." Further down the hall, hospital security was reviewing the surveillance video from that morning. The grainy footage depicted Max appearing from the thick woods behind the hospital. His posture was low but determined as he carried the girl on his mission. He stopped at the automatic doors just long enough for them to open, then proceeded straight inside. There was no hesitation or confusion. He knew precisely where he needed to go. A guard remarked quietly, "That's no ordinary stray." Back in Trauma Room 3, Dr. Patel was adjusting the girl's oxygen supply, casting a brief look at Max before turning back to the vital signs. "She's stabilizing," he said quietly. "Still critical, but she's putting up a fight." Max let out a soft sigh, his ears moving slightly. He had been listening. He had fulfilled his duty. Now, he was waiting for her to regain consciousness. By the early afternoon, Detective Ben Carter had reached St. Helena Medical Center. Known for being calm, methodical, and having sharp instincts, Carter paid close attention as Nurse Lena and hospital security showed him the surveillance recordings. He observed, with his arms crossed, as Max came out of the woods, carrying the girl with an uncanny sense of purpose. He emerged from the forest, Carter noted. That's county property, nothing but trees and pathways for miles. Although Carter made a point of not becoming emotionally invested in animals during an investigation, there was something about this dog that struck him as remarkable. "This is more than a coincidence," he stated, looking out the window towards the forest. He guided her here for a specific reason. By 3 p.m., a search party had been organized. It consisted of local law enforcement, a K-9 unit, and Ranger Miles Cooper, a veteran tracker with more than 2 decades of experience navigating the dense forest that bordered the city. Max, who was still watchful by Sophie's bedside, growled softly when he noticed the group assembling near the ER entrance. It was not a sound of aggression, but one of attention and acknowledgement. Ranger Cooper knelt down beside him. "You know the way back, don't you, boy?" Max did not require a leash. He simply got to his feet, walked over to the door, and glanced back once, as if to signal, "Follow me." The team followed as Max guided them across the parking lot, over a drainage ditch, and into the dense embrace of the forest. The ground quickly became difficult to traverse, covered in mud, roots, and broken branches. Max proceeded with care, but without stopping. After nearly an hour of quiet pursuit, they located it, a makeshift shelter concealed under a covering of brush and fallen logs. There was a ripped tarp, charred firewood, food packaging, and something more disturbing, a cloth stained with blood and a small child's shoe covered in dirt. "My God," one of them whispered. She was here, and she had company. Night had descended upon St. Helena Medical Center. The active bustle of the day had subsided into quiet murmurs and hushed conversations. In the pediatric intensive care unit, the lighting was dimmed to a soft luminescence. Monitors flashed rhythmically as medical devices whispered and pulsed. Max was curled up on a thin blanket next to the hospital bed. His body was close to the wall, but his eyes remained open. His ears would prick up at every beep, every sound of footsteps in the corridor. He had not left Sophie's side since her arrival. Nurses moved around him on tiptoe, taking care not to bother the unusual guardian. They offered him water and even placed a bowl of food for him, but he hardly acknowledged it. He would only lift his head from time to glance at the monitor before laying it back down, as if protecting something precious. Sophie had not moved for hours. She was pale, her breathing faint but regular under the oxygen mask. Her small, scraped, and bruised fingers lay on the bed's edge. Then, just before sunrise, a change occurred. It started small. A soft gasp, then another. Max's ears instantly perked up. Sophie's eyelids began to flutter. The nurse on duty, who had been dozing with a chart in her lap, sat up alertly. "Doctor," she called out, already on her feet. But Max was quicker. He rose slowly and moved toward the bed, his paws making no sound on the tile. He placed his chin gently on the edge of the mattress, observing as Sophie's eyes blinked open. They were unfocused initially, but then they gradually and clearly centered on him. Her lips quivered. "Max," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Max responded with a soft whine, almost a sound of relief, and drew closer, nuzzling his snout against her hand as gently as a breath. The room was filled with quiet emotion. The doctor hurried in, but no one could have reacted quickly enough to miss the moment. It was a reunion that required no words, no explanation. In that instant, every person watching knew. Max had not just rescued her. He had stayed to see her return. The morning sun filtered gently through the blinds of Sophie's hospital room. The soft beeping of machines marked the passage of life, one beat at a time. Max was curled up under her bed, as still as a statue, yet ever watchful. Opposite her, Dr. Eliza Monroe sat with a notepad and a kind expression. Her voice was soothing, designed to build trust. "Sophie," she said softly, "do you feel up to telling me what occurred?" Sophie gave a slight nod. Her fingers intertwined with Max's dense fur, anchoring her. "There was a man," she started. "I think his name was Alan. I had seen him around before. He used to bring tools to work on things at our neighbor's house. He always smiled and waved at me. He wasn't a stranger." Eliza maintained a neutral expression, listening intently. "One day, Max and I were playing in the yard. He drove up in his truck and told me my mom said I needed to go with him, that it was an emergency. I didn't find it strange. He appeared calm." She paused, her gaze distant. "But he didn't drive me to my mom. He just continued driving. It felt like hours. I don't recall falling asleep. When I woke, we were in the forest. He said we were camping and that I would be safer there with him. Initially, he was quiet, as if pretending everything was fine. But then he seemed to snap. He became angry. He started talking to people who weren't there. He kept saying the world was a dangerous place, that I didn't need my mom anymore, only him. When I asked to go home, he yelled. He struck me." Max barked and tried to intervene. "He kicked Max. After that, I don't remember much." Sophie's voice faded to a whisper. Her entire frame tensed beneath the blanket. Eliza noticed the tremor in her hands, the way her fingers gripped Max's fur as if it were a lifeline. Her eyes were fixed on a point in the distance, wide and unblinking. A lone tear formed but did not fall. Her expression was frozen, that of a child marked by something far too grown up. "Fear. I believed I was going to die there," she whispered. "I couldn't make a sound. I couldn't get away. I just waited. I thought nobody would ever find me." She turned towards Max, pressing her face gently against his shoulder. "He didn't abandon me," she murmured. "Even when I couldn't move, even after I lost consciousness, he remained. He brought me home." Dr. Monroe sat in silence, profoundly affected. This was not merely a case of violence. It was a tale of delusion, obsession, and a dog that refused to leave the one who depended on him most. The day following Sophie's awakening, a new kind of energy flowed through St. Helena Medical Center. The account of the dog who rescued a little girl had traveled well beyond the hospital's confines, first as rumors among the staff, then to the desks of detectives and finally into news headlines. Detective Ben Carter acted swiftly, using Sophie's account and the path Max had shown them. His team reconstructed the abduction's path. Deep in the woods, they discovered more than just the makeshift camp. Security camera footage from a nearby gas station corroborated the rest of the story. Alan Price, 39, a former handyman from Sophie's neighborhood, was the man who had abducted her. 2 days later, they located him by himself, pacing nervously in front of a gas station 20 miles away. He surrendered without a struggle. Inside his backpack were a child's broken bracelet, a sketchbook, and unopened snack foods. Sophie's belongings. It wasn't like that, he mumbled as the handcuffs were secured. But at that point, his version of events held no interest for anyone. Back at the hospital, Sophie had been relocated to a private room for her recovery. Although she remained weak, her natural color had returned, and she had begun to eat again. Max stayed by her side, never leaving her, not even to sleep. Then, shortly before sunset, the elevator doors opened. Mara Whitfield, Sophie's mother, entered the pediatric wing on unsteady feet. Her hair was disheveled, her face gaunt from lack of sleep. The instant she saw Sophie through the window, her strength failed her. A nurse caught her just before she collapsed. I believed she was gone, Mara whispered. I believed I would never see her again. Inside the room, Sophie's eyes brightened. She sat up slowly, her breath catching in her throat. "Mom," she said, her voice just above a whisper. Mara hurried through the doorway and dropped to her knees beside the bed. Her hands shook as she reached out to touch Sophie's face. "Oh my God, my baby," she cried. "My sweet girl. I am so sorry. I should have been there. I should have kept you safe." Tears streamed down Sophie's face, but she smiled as she reached out to embrace her mother. They clung to each other for what seemed an eternity. And then Max rose to his feet. He took one step forward. Mara looked at him through tear-filled eyes. She reached out and rested her hand on his head, whispering through a sob, "You saved her. You brought her back to me." Max just stood there, serene and motionless. No bark, no sound. Only his presence, his loyalty, his love. A few days later, Sophie was well enough to walk once more. Her first steps were slow, holding her mother's hand, while Max remained close, always within a few inches of her. Staff from all over the hospital came to bid them farewell. Some offered gentle words. Others gave silent gestures of respect. One nurse tied a red ribbon around Max's neck and whispered, "You are a true hero." He did not wag his tail. He had no need to. Outside, the morning air was mild, and sunlight washed over the hospital entrance. Mara held Sophie tightly as they left the building, one hand on her daughter's shoulder, the other stroking Max's back. They paused for a moment at the top of the stairs. Sophie looked at Max, knelt down with care, and hugged him around the neck. "You brought me home," she said softly. Max leaned into her embrace, quiet and still. Mara observed them both, a tear rolling down her cheek, not of pain this time, but of something akin to peace. Then the three of them, mother, daughter, and dog, walked on together, away from the hospital, away from the darkness, and toward the light.